Yo, what the hell is up? Welcome back to Reviews with Jake, where I just got done watching The Boogeyman. The Boogeyman is based on a short story by Stephen King, which I have not read, but it's about a tragedy-stricken family that suddenly becomes haunted by the infamous creature in the closet. Totally did not anticipate doing a full-length review of this one, but I walked out of the theater with in-depth thoughts that I felt like I needed to get out into the ether. Thoughts that I legitimately don't know how I'm gonna elaborate upon them without doing something I've never done before, so let's give it a try. This is my first spoiler review of a film ever. I'm gonna dive into the nitty-gritty specifics, and if you don't want to hear any of that about The Boogeyman, here's the time code to jump ahead to the verdict. However, if you've seen the movie and or don't care if it gets spoiled for you, strap in. Here we go. As always, we're gonna start with the pros of this film, and frankly, it starts with the all-encompassing pro of this movie, and that is the direction. This is a very well-made film. Constantly throughout the runtime, I was remarking on how impressed I was with all the things I was seeing and hearing. From the very first scene and shot, immediately I pulled out my notepad and wrote down 3 pros immediately, after one shot. That's nuts. One of which was the camera work. This opening sequence was just basically a long, continuous pan around a child's bedroom, going past photographs and funky lights. It was quite an attention-grabbing way to start the movie. And throughout the film, I was blessed with a lot of great cinematography, awesome camera moves and compositions, all of which making me ooh and ah. The second thing I wrote down immediately was the lighting. I was impressed. I mean, granted, it's almost a must-have in a movie about this fabled creature that lurks around in the shadows. You have to have strong lighting, or at least a good control of it, but boy, did it elevate above what was expected. And it's not just the creative use of light, playing around with different light sources from sequence to sequence, throwing color into the mix and incorporating shadows strategically, but it's just the sheer execution of it. It was all very impressive. Like with what A Quiet Place did with sound design and audio is what this movie did with lighting. It had to be good, but it didn't settle for good enough. It decided to elevate it and really turn it into a strength of the film. On the note of sound design, that was the third thing I wrote down immediately. It was strong in that first sequence, and it held true throughout the whole runtime. The first shot of this film, while it's panning around this room, we're introduced to the titular creature, but we never actually see him outside of some shadow work, but we hear him, and it's harrowing. You hear the creature talking to the kid, mimicking its loved ones as it's drawing closer and closer, and it sounds just like a normal person, but in between the breaths are these grunts that are just this really disturbing, unnatural sound, and it was just horrifying. And then throughout the rest of the runtime, it continued to hold true with a very vast and full soundscape, with this creature weaving in and out of shadows lurking about. It was brilliant. The incorporation of these 3 elements paved the way to some really great tense moments throughout this film. Very unique stuff. Yes, there are a handful of jump scares in this, but they don't feel fake and unearned. They're very well orchestrated. Most of which are unfolded in these very nightmarish locales, which leads me to the set design, and I loved it. Wherever this creature goes to set up shop, you start to see these black markings on the walls and ceilings that look like mold and like a spider web pattern. It was really filthy and glorious, and really sold the unnatural aura surrounding this creature. It reminded me something from like Resident Evil 7 or something. If I saw this shit on my ceiling as a homeowner, I admit my first instinct would not be, oh, a creature from hell just moved into our house. It would probably be more along the lines of, that's gonna be expensive, isn't it? I suppose that's what separates us, the adults, and the kids that this thing is scooping up. On the note of this creature, I did really appreciate its design. Most of the time it kind of lurks around the shadows throughout most of the movie, which is probably a good call considering the limitations of the budget, I assume. But towards the end of the film, when we start to see greater doses than just a glimpse here and there, I really dug the way that this thing looked and moved. No wonder the acting performances were so strong in this movie, because if I saw this thing slithering around in my basement, you'd get an Oscar out of me as I ran out the door. All the same, the cast of this film was very strong. A lot of names and faces I didn't recognize personally, but they all crushed it. This Sophie Thatcher as the lead oldest daughter, the father played by Chris Messina, and the youngest daughter played by a Vivian Lyra Blair, if I'm not mistaken. All 3 of them crushed it. You even get an appearance from David Dastmalchian, who I always love seeing in things. He did a good job playing sort of patient zero that appears and kind of lures the boogeyman towards this family. He does a great job as well. There really wasn't a weak link across across the board, I thought everyone answered the bell that the script gave them. However, this leads me right to the cons, which much like the pros can mostly be encompassed by one single thing: the writing. Which is surprising considering how natural a lot of the dialogue felt and how great the acting performances were, but the overarching story and some of the finer details in between were really tough for me. Let's start with all the cliches, cause boy, this movie is littered with them. You got the teen angsty drama, which you always seem to find shoehorned into movies like this, and there's way more of it here than you care to see. Just these awful, outlandish, ridiculous, and unrealistic supporting characters surrounding this teen angst bullshit that I just did not believe in the slightest. Like, they were just amplified to a cartoonish degree. Then, of course, you get the cliche of the parent who somehow does not believe that something's going on despite everything screaming that it is. Which leads to the investigative component, which we've all seen a million times. I mean, it just feels like I could see what this movie was doing 10 minutes prior to it actually happening, because it's traveling the same journey that we've all seen before and making sure to stop at every single stop along the way, these familiar vantage points, to take a picture. And this film was so hell-bent on making all those stops, even if it meant doing so in a very absurd, awkward, and hilarious way. There are countless examples. Let's dive into a few. How badly do we not want this dad to see that this creature is torturing his kids? How about in a single evening where Boogeyman scurries out of the closet making all kinds of noise as he scampers across the hardwood along the way, knocks this little girl off of her bed and she hits the ground and thuds so loud that she's bleeding after hitting the ground. Is that loud enough to wake up Dad? No? Okay. How about a couple minutes later where both daughters are awake in the middle of the night, Dad's still sleeping, and they're doing this whole shoestring tooth removal with a door situation. The door slams shut by itself, yanking the kid's tooth out. They all start screaming and freaking out and hugging each other saying, "I don't know what's going on." That enough to wake them up? Still no? Okay. They're at least gonna mention it at breakfast, right? Dad's eating toast, reading the paper. Hey, heard a lot of screams, thuds, and door slams last night. What's up? Nothing? We're just gonna move on? Is this guy even sleeping in the same house? I mean, we see the exterior of the house. It's not that big. We're not dealing with a mansion or a castle like Hill House here. That not bad enough? Okay, how about David Dastmalchian's character who comes to Dad's home practice of therapy to become a new patient? The script forces Dad to announce that he's recording the conversation on a tape recorder, sets it down on the table, they talk for a little bit, Dad leaves, Boogeyman comes out and kills David Dastmalchian's character with an audio recording going. Noted. The police arrive, there's a whole investigation, but no one looks into the tape recorder rolling on the table in the room where a guy dies mysteriously? Really? But we, the audience, remember, we know that tape recorder is going to come into play at some point. It's just going to be a matter of when it happens, how it happens, and who does it. The Who, it's our main character, the oldest daughter, who is already starting to acknowledge that weird shit is happening around her. The Win, about in the second act, where she could really use some evidence to convince Dad that weird is happening because he's not buying it. The How? Well, for starters, the audio recorder is sitting, I believe, in a different location than the table it was set on before David Dastmalchian died, so that's peculiar. Someone picked it up and moved it and no one thought to listen to it. And apparently they show the audio recorder and the clip is not like 13 hours long, so someone stopped recording and didn't think to listen to it. Was it the Boogeyman? Was it the dad? He didn't think to give it a listen or hand it over to the cops maybe? But okay, I'll buy it for the sake of argument. I'll go along with it. She starts listening to the tape, it's rolling. I'm like, okay, maybe ghost magic manipulated the tape and it's not gonna be worth a damn. Nope, I'd say it's pretty incriminating evidence that would really nip this film in the bud if she showed it to anyone like her dad, which presents a very complicated issue for the plot. Because we need the daughter to listen to the tape and get the information, but we can't let Dad get the information and hear the tape because that's gonna end the movie. So what's gonna happen that allows her to hear it, but not him? I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but hear me out. What if she's listening to the audio recorder really close, like right up to it, and then it emits a really loud screeching sound, and then it causes her to freak out and toss the audio recorder straight up into the air, and then it lands right into the open mouth of a nearby water pitcher sitting on a table right next to her? That would do it, right? Seriously? That's how you're gonna write yourself out of this jam? I was watching in real time in anticipation, curious, like, this is game changer evidence sitting right here and it's very early in the movie. Like, it can't be this simple, right? It's recorded on a really tight shot right on her listening to the audio recorder, and then right when the noise happens, it cuts out to a wide shot with her on like the right side of the frame, and on the left side of the frame is the comedically placed water pitcher. And it just plops in there. Like, it was the most Humpty Dumpty thing I think I've ever seen in a movie, and I laughed out loud in the theater. I laughed more audibly at that than I did the entire Super Mario Brothers movie. It was ridiculous. Is that not enough for you? Okay, how about this big elaborate trap in which this lady's trying to kill the boogeyman, and she has tripwires all over a room that basically end in the boogeyman taking like 10 to 12 shotgun shells from various directions right to the body. Our main character, the daughter, is in the room to see this happen firsthand. See this thing get up after taking like 15 shotgun shells to the body, kill the woman, the daughter flees, runs home, talks to the little sister and says, I think we can hurt this thing. That's your takeaway after what you just saw? You saw this thing enter full God mode, taking shotgun shells like a champ, brush it off like it's nothing, and now you think you can hurt it? Bold strategy, Cotton, but okay, what's the plan you have in mind? Now let's use our imagination here a little bit. For the sake of argument, because I don't own one, this is a hockey stick. Seriously, that's your plan? Buckshot doesn't kill this thing, but you think slapshot will? What the f? Just so many contradictions, stretches, conveniences, silliness that I could keep going, but I don't want to because I feel like I've already ravaged this film enough and I feel bad. Why do I feel so bad? Funny you should ask. By the time that the credits roll, I already decided that I was doing a full-length review on this one because it's an interesting case study of fantastic direction and bad writing. Now, I went into this movie not looking into who wrote it and who directed it. Sometimes I look at that stuff prior, sometimes I don't, sometimes I just like to be surprised. This is one of the cases where I did not know anything. Director, Rob Savage, the guy who gave us Host a few years back, the found footage COVID film, was actually pretty good. I don't think he's ever ventured outside of found footage before, but he jumps out into a regular format and he crushes it. Good on him. How about the writer credit? Well, 3 names pop up, 2 of which mortify me to the bone. Brian Woods and Scott Beck, the writers and directors of 65. Now, I believe I've only done 4 full-length reviews so far this year, one of which being 65 because I had to go on a big venting spree about how bad the writing was. And I knew in that very minute I was about to do it again to the same 2 damn guys. I feel terrible, just awful, because these are Iowa boys. I actually went to a film festival where they were guests of honor. They did a little Q&A at a film festival I was at, and I actually talked to them. They're really freaking nice. They're really a true inspiration to break out of the cornfield circles of Iowa that I am at and break through to the other side to write a fantastic film like A Quiet Place. And it absolutely pained me to rip apart 65, and it kills me now to rip this one apart. I really didn't want to do it, but I already had it set in my mind that I was going to do this full-length review for it, and I can't change that just because I saw 2 names from my home state. I don't want to do this. I never want to speak negative about a film. There's too much negativity on the internet as is. I never want to watch a bad movie. I want to talk about how happy a movie made me. I know these guys will bounce back. They're super talented. A Quiet Place was fantastic, and just because the last 2 things I saw I was not a fan of at all doesn't mean I'm done seeing their stuff. Now that said, I have no sources or research or anything on this. This is just straight feel and hypothesis. But I feel like there was some studio interference on this film. I have no idea if it's true. It very well could not be. I'm just operating off of feel as I was watching this, and this felt like a movie that was altered substantially in post-production. Based on what I saw in this film, it felt like it should be a film longer than 90 minutes that it clocked out at, and it also felt like it should be a rated R film and not the PG-13 that it rated at. The backstories and themes, the lore, the characters, the tragedy, it feels like there's so much more to this film that we didn't really properly explore. It feels like we just kind of got a surface level scratch of them. But in order to dive between the cracks, it would have taken a lot more time to at least do it successfully, and we probably would have had to take off the training wheels, the guard wheels, and go full R and not just PG-13 trying to skate by and keep that rating. This just felt like a movie that was holding back from start to finish. It wanted to make that step, but it knew if it did, it was gonna hit R, and that means less butts and seats. They wanted PG-13 teenagers to see this movie. Hell, Megan earlier this year was the same thing, and that was heavily reported that it was edited down to become a PG-13 movie because they wanted that younger crowd. And I could really feel with this movie too. I feel like it's probably the case. Oftentimes the pacing of this film just felt off. It was like weird transitions between scares and scenes, music and needle drops. It all just felt like it was off, like it wasn't marinating as smoothly as it was supposed to. I could be dead wrong about this, but based on what I know about the horror genre, looking at what this film was and how it felt, it just feels like this was tinkered with in the editing room, and I'd be curious to learn if that was accurate. All in all, this is a classic example of superb direction and subpar writing, equating to a slightly above average horror flick. I'm going to give The Boogeyman a C+. But that is just me. What do you think? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe to this channel to stay up to date with new reviews coming real soon. Stay safe. Thanks for checking in.